Although prednisone had given me a new course on life during the time I was taking it, I knew the time I'd be taking it was limited, and even 2 days before completing my course of prednisone as prescribed by my family physician, I started seeing my bowel movements change. Stools were smaller, less compacted, and 3 days after, or about 3 days after finishing the course of apoprednisone, meaning generic prednisone, I was seeing symptoms that led me to believe that my ulcerative colitis was coming back for another flare-up. So begrudgingly I started taking the Asacol that had been prescribed for me. Now, Asacol being 5 molecules of acetylsalicylic acid, or ASA, basically modified aspirin, and with a binder. Now, this, in retrospect, I found didn't help me more than relieve the pain, if you want, a little bit of the inflammation. Much like aspirin would help a headache, it doesn't make the core reason why you have a headache go away. It just masks it, and you feel, okay, there's something there, but I can cope with it, or I feel great, but I still know. So that was pretty much how I was running the course on Asacol. It wasn't helping me more than that. Definitely wasn't helping me as much as I felt prednisone had. But during my course of prednisone, I'd had a conversation, as I regularly did even before my flare-up, with the owner of the local health food store, as I was interested in health food, natural food, organic food, and health supplements. She mentioned a natural practitioner, or a dietary consultant, if you want, a nutritional consultant, who had this technique called bio-meridian testing that lived about 4 hours from where I lived and was available for consultations. Now, bio-meridian testing, or as she called it, omega testing, is a rather controversial subject because there are many in the medical field who, like most natural or alternative approaches, consider omega testing or biomeridian testing to be quackery. Had I not had a reason to go over to where she lived, I probably would have said, you know, not for me, thanks, no thanks. But considering I was already going there for a musical gig, I thought, I'll call her up, schedule an appointment, see what happens. When I got over to the nutritional consultant's place, I saw the machine that would be testing me was small enough to put on a tabletop, maybe that or that, and was connected to a laptop about the same size and a printer. And basically the way that biomeridian testing works is much like acupuncture has its energy points or meridians, which symbolize different or correspond to different organs or systems in your body, be it the skin, the lungs, the liver, the large intestine, for example. And all these different meridian points on your hands and feet correspond to different systems in your body, and thus the energy going through those parts can be measured by just measuring those points here. To those of you who don't believe in being able to measure anything electric from the body, need I say that our nervous system runs on electricity, and that explains why a person being electrocuted will see his nervous system, his or her nervous system, go into overdrive or overwhelm the person altogether, and boom, there we go, passed out or worse. So there definitely is electricity in our bodies, and using a cylindrical metallic device as a probe in one hand, and then a soft needle type probe on the other to measure the different energy meridians, biomeridians on the other hand, or the feet, and then switch it over so that your body would be part of a circuit that could be measured by the machine. And all those different energy points ended up with a reading between 0 and 100 on the measurement screen, if you want, those little needles that go up and down. Now, anything, this is 6 years ago, so bear with me, I might not remember the numbers exactly, but anything between 45 and 55 on the meter meant that that body part was doing well. Anything above 55 meant the body part was into hyper mode, was overworking itself, and anything below 45 meant it had gone beyond being overworked. It could no longer cope. Now, my large intestine, lo and behold, was the one who showed up as being overworked. So we set out to test foods and food additives, ingredients, and other things such as my shampoo that I brought up, hair restorative shampoo, hair regrowth, which, although it does have spearmint in it and smells great, I wouldn't use it as a salad dressing. In that sense, the way the machine would work is either you take what you wanted to test your body against and put it on the machine in a certain place, where a certain receptacle, if you want, or in the machine there were already all these electrical imprints of different foods, so you didn't have to bring the supermarket to the machine. It had already measured different foods, changed their analog imprint, which is the presence of the food, if you want to call it analog, to a digital form stored inside the machine, which it could then test against your body to see how, in my case, the large intestine would react to those foods. So I was astounded at how many ingredients came up as off limits for me, where I had to follow this personalized diet. First off, wheat, meaning white flour, whole wheat flour, bread, coatings on chicken, like breaded foods I couldn't touch. Wheat starch. Cornstarch. Corn. Now, cornstarch is pretty much everywhere, almost everywhere, as I was to find out. Milk ingredients, and also soy, both of them being in chocolate, soy lecithin, and vegetarian burgers or sausages which were based on soy I couldn't touch anymore, so I had to let those go. I couldn't touch regular potatoes, white potatoes, so no French fries, no instant mashed potatoes, but I could touch red potatoes, which were rarer, weren't red, they were white, had a higher water content, which is why we figured maybe I could eat those. But I could eat rice, but I couldn't touch MSG, so goodbye Chinese food. I couldn't touch food coloring, so that even meant things like Kool-Aid I couldn't touch. Sugar, cane sugar was right on the border of overworking my large intestine, so I couldn't touch that either. And the list went on and on and on. Foods I never touched, I still couldn't touch. My body still had problems with them. So I ended up with this diet that was quite extensive of stuff that I couldn't touch. There was foods that I never ate or hated. I all of a sudden felt compelled to eat because it was one of the few things I could eat, like shellfish, seafood. I don't like that, and but I had to eat them. And certain fruits like oranges couldn't touch. Most fruits were fine, most vegetables were fine. I was left with a diet that had me feeling overwhelmed myself. The practitioner was immediately apologetic and saying, listen, you don't have to follow this, it's just a guideline, but in the long run, I was like, listen, I paid $80, $85 for a consultation with you. It would be crazy for me not to follow it. So for the next 3 months, I followed it diligently in the fashion that I thought was right. And I'll go into detail as to how I was able to follow that and how it basically helped me out. Even though I was pretty much miserable most of the time, I could head out. I could do the things I needed to do. I didn't necessarily feel healthy or happy, but at least I wasn't running to the washroom all the time. Sometimes I still was.